about myself as an artist. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, but even if you've seen my work, I think you guys are going to learn a little bit more about me tonight. So my name is Gillian Probert. I'm an artist originally from San Diego, California, but I came out here in 2018 to go to Eckerd College, where I graduated. Yes, I see some other Eckerd people here tonight. And so while I was in school, I studied visual arts and business management. And upon graduating school, it was really easy to combine, not necessarily easy, but it worked out well for me to combine those skills and interests to my now job, where I am actually currently the curator at Duncan McClellan Glass Gallery. Now, if you guys haven't gotten a chance to go down there, I highly recommend it. Come any day that I'm working and I'm happy to give you a tour. And that's located in the Warehouse Arts District, not too far from here at all. So that is where I'm in charge of exhibitions and things like that. So I actually plan all of our major shows, inviting artists to come visit us, and putting together the curation element. So I feel like my artistic journey has really bled from one element to the next in a way that I'm very proud of. And so let's get started by showing you guys some of the glass artwork that I've made this year. So these pieces actually are some of the earlier works that I made in 2025. They predate everything in the show. Now you will notice this middle piece here is actually present in the show. So that piece actually sold at a previous show, but it tied into some of the themes that I really wanted it to be present for this location. And so you can see with the process here, I am going to be going into depth on how I actually make these works. There's a lot that goes into them, and I'm actually fairly new to glass as a medium. I will share some of the other mediums that I've worked in, but I've only actually worked in glass for the last 2 years, if you guys can believe it. And that's when all of this has come to fruition. So I'm very excited to tell you guys more about that. And so let's get started by talking about the glass process, how I actually make these pieces. And I do want to preface, when I first applied to this show, it's actually the second year in a row that I've applied, and I was so excited to be accepted. It's a big moment for any artist to be part of an emerging artist program like this, where you can really hone in your skills and kind of practice operating on a much higher level. And so when I first applied to the show, I actually applied with different mediums, like painting, ceramic, and the glass. But Amanda reached out to me and she says, you know, we have the opportunity to expand this into the Truly collection, and we believe that the glass and the glass would be a wonderful pairing. Well, at the time, this piece had actually sold through Florida Craft Art. I had this piece available, and this piece went to a family member. So I didn't have much inventory when she reached out to me, and she says, you know, we want to put the show together in March, and this was in November that we're having these conversations, and she says, can you make 8 pieces? And I'm like, yeah, I can, absolutely, of course I can. And then I look at my calendar, and I see I'm scheduling it out, which luckily is one of my skills. I am very good at the business side and the planning side of all of this art stuff. And so I looked and I said, I have exactly 2 weeks to make each piece. Well, guess how long it takes me to make a piece? 2 weeks. So I figured I have just enough time, and I didn't want to let the quality of the work suffer either. I didn't want to rush these pieces. So when my parents came and visited me from California, which is where I'm originally from, we were doing Christmas visits and Thanksgiving dinner with me sketching during movie night and things. So I was really dedicated towards making this show happen. And I really wanted to show my best glass work to the community. You know, I really wanted that to be prevalent. And so we pulled it together, and surprisingly, I actually finished about 2 weeks ahead of schedule, because what I didn't calculate for was that I was going to become faster at making these pieces the more that I did it. So that was a blessing in disguise, and it allowed me to pick up a few ceramic commissions as well in between that were surprisingly due the same weekend that the show was due. So, you know, I hear it from artists, it's either all at once or nothing at all, and that just tends to happen in the art world. So let's talk a little bit about how I make these works. If you guys take a look around in the gallery, you'll notice that these pieces have 2 layers of color. They have a background color and a foreground color, which is usually that black. So these are actually blown forms. So I work at a glass gallery. We do soft glass pulled out of a furnace. So theoretically, you know, these were all blown by hand with a team of artists. So all of the artwork in this particular show was actually blown by my mentor and boss, Duncan McClellan. So I give him a huge thank you for his mentorship and ability to pull all this together as well. But he basically he's been a glass artist for over 40 years. So he has a lot of inventory of what we call blank vessels. And you can see some of the photos. These are what the vessels look like before I started working on them. In particular, let's see if I can work out this laser pointer. Yes, this one right here, I guess you can't see it too well, actually was the same orange piece that you see right over here. It is the same piece, but originally they're coated in that black glass coating. And sometimes you actually don't even know what color they are on the inside until you start carving into them. So that's a fun surprise as well when you're working with material. So this collection was a bunch of vessels that Duncan blew, but maybe they had a small chip in them, or maybe they had an uneven bottom. Maybe they weren't something that he was able to use, but I sure could. And so another part of this process, in addition to blowing the forms, is actually learning to cold work the forms. So with glass, we can use diamond wheels and different blades to actually carve the glass and make it flat, make it sit flat on its bottom. And this right here is a punty mark, that image on your left, my right. So that is anytime you blow something by hand, you have to physically break it off of the pipe in order to keep it, because when you're blowing it, it's on a pipe. And that usually leaves what we call a punty mark, which then has to be cleaned up because it's a harsh break. It does kind of fracture the glass. Now, sometimes it breaks up into the piece and you actually have to repair the glass, which I've had some experience doing. I actually also work with resin. So I've even used resin to fix things that other artists may not be able to salvage. And that has been quite successful because the resin is actually stronger than the glass. So structurally, it becomes sounder than it was in the beginning. So these are just some pictures of me using the cold working studio again at Duncan McClellan Gallery. I mean, I'm so blessed to be able to use all the equipment and things there and to have such wonderful mentors to teach me what I'm doing. And then here's my favorite part. This is the design aspect. Later, you guys are going to see some of my early illustrations. Drawing is kind of where art really started for me. So as I went through college and some things, I had a really strong interest in sculpture, something tangible. I can use my hands and I can bring it to life. Something about that is just so magical to me. So with this collection, I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to bring my drawings to life in a three-dimensional form. So I actually gave a talk previously at Duncan McClellan Gallery. We did a staff show that I had my work featured in, which is actually where this piece sold. This particular piece, you'll see it throughout the presentation. And for that show, I gave a lecture called Glass as a Canvas. So it's not too, it's somewhat similar to what you guys are hearing today. But again, imagine you had a blank canvas. To me, that's what these glass pieces are. And so the artwork and the artistry isn't just blowing the forms. I mean, of course, that's an important part of it. And I'll get to my progress with blowing my own forms at the end of the presentation. But I really think the artistry and bringing the vessels to life does have a lot of merit on its own. And so I do, during this design process, I do also want to talk about physically how we're getting the artwork patterning onto the design. So you'll notice that this image here has this white covering on the vessel. So that's actually a very thick vinyl tape. So the first step after the piece has been cold worked is we cover the entire vessel in that tape. So it would be covered from top to bottom with this white, thick, gluey, like heavy-duty tape. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking X-Acto blades and pencils, and I'm hand drawing each of those designs. I'm taking the X-Acto blade, I'm cutting away the tape and peeling it. So when we go to the next step, which is the carving, the tape protects everything that's black. And then the sandblaster, which is how we do the carving, removes all of the exposed material in a really soft way that doesn't actually damage or scratch the glass the way some hand tools would. So it's a very interesting masking process. This is also how Duncan creates his vessels, which I've learned from. So here's the carving process. You can actually see a little picture of me, getting in there in the sandblaster. It's a heavy-duty piece of equipment. You do have to wear protection. You can choose to wear ear protection or not. Depends how many concerts you've been to in your life, right? And then for the sandblaster, of course, you have to wear a respirator because there is sand actually shooting through the room. And it's also a mix of iron oxide. It's not just pure sand, but it's basically a composite that will remove the glass. And it's actually a giant box. So where I'm putting my hands into, I'm using gloves to actually physically hold the vessel. And you'll notice some of these are not small. So I'm having to physically hold the vessel rotate it with these gloves, and then in my other hand, I'm holding a nozzle that is shooting sand at a very high velocity and trying to slowly carve away that black glass myself. And with that process, I've been lucky, knock on wood, to not ruin any pieces, but in the early days, I have overcarved. If you're not careful, and another thing is you're looking at black and you're trying to carve through black. Well, you don't always know what that color underneath is going to look like. So sometimes you don't know what you're looking for. So for example, there was one instance where I had a little bit of tape that actually fell into the bottom of the piece, which I didn't think much about. Okay, there's tape on the inside. I'm not sandblasting the inside. But when I broke through the black, I could see the white tape, and I thought that was the color of the vessel, but it was just the color of the tape. So I kept carving the rest of the vessel, expecting that color to appear, but it was just the tape. So I actually had to start taking the practice of carving a little bit, bringing it into the light, checking what I'm carving, checking the depth, checking the color, checking that the black is being removed. That you can actually sandblast straight through the vessel if you're not careful. It does remove material fairly slowly, so you have time to not make those mistakes, but you have to be very cognizant of what you're doing. And you're sweaty and trying not to breathe in dust, and you can barely see what you're doing. So if you go on my social media, I do have some videos of the actual sandblasting process. I've kind of found a way to hide my phone in there and capture that. So you can definitely look up more of those videos later. And then after, I guess I'll go back to the slide, I just want to show this is what the pieces look like when they're complete. So the carving is the final step. After that, you're basically just removing the tape, and then you have that black revealed underneath. So I do use a treatment because the sandblaster leaves a lot of dust and particles in the glass. So I do use a treatment to actually kind of buff up the glass and make it look prettier, the parts that were carved. But other than using like a lacquer to polish the surface, you're pretty much done. Once you're done sandblasting, you use a hand tool to sign the work, and then you put it on a shelf, it's ready to sell. And I have been lucky this past year. I've sold 4 vessels before the show, and these don't have a small price point on them. So I was very lucky to kind of start. The St. Pete scene is really starting to see me rise up a little bit this year. And I've had some ceramic sales and commissions. So that brings me to my other medium. So I've told you guys about glass, but we're going to actually go backwards in time and kind of start from today, moving backwards through the mediums that I've kind of been interested in. So in college, I really dove deep into ceramics. Again, wanting to build things with my hands. And I also had Brian Ransom as a professor. If you guys are familiar with his work, he's a wonderful ceramicist, and he actually specializes in musical instruments made, not really instruments, musical objects that are made of ceramic. So he'll create like wind tunnels that the wind floats through your piece and makes a vibration. He's also set up toners and things like electronic toners that will amplify one tone through your vessel. And so this particular piece, all the way at the end, is just under 4 feet tall. It is not small at all. And I hand built that in college. It took me an entire month just to hand build it, and like another half of a month to do the separate firings. Had to use a single kiln for it. Luckily, Eckerd has amazing kilns. The students actually, there's a class called kiln construction, which I didn't take, but I did use the kilns a lot that were built. So that was one of my earlier pieces, and it also does include natural materials. So I am inspired by nature, but I also love using natural materials in a lot of my work. And typically, not always, but typically when I can afford, if I use natural materials in my work and it sells, I do try to donate a portion to the Nature Conservancy in a lot of the work that I do, because I really believe that if I'm taking from nature, I need to be giving back as well. So you'll notice that piece in the end actually has a dove's nest, a raven's skull, and then on the side it actually has paper wasp nests actually embedded into the ceramic carvings that I created. So I love that piece. It sits in my room. I have had people try to buy it, and I really have trouble separating with it because it inspires me to want to make more pieces. And then the middle piece here I actually made earlier this year. It was shown at a show, and it is actually going to be featured in the Gulfport. They have an Arts Out show that's upcoming next month, and the opening reception is June 2nd at the James Museum. So it's up for consideration. I don't know if it'll win or not, but they're choosing a few pieces from the show at the Gulfport Public Library to then display at the James Museum. So you never know. That would be a really exciting opportunity. And then this here is from my senior show at Eckerd. Some people actually might have seen it in that show. And the bottom is ceramic, The middle pieces are actually just wooden branches, and then I made ceramic feathers and I did a watercolor painting. So this kind of shows how I bring mediums together in installation art. So I really just love to see how one medium can bleed into another. How can I combine resin and glass? How can I, paint on glass even? I don't know. I have to see what comes in the future. But ceramic has been just a really wonderful material to work with animals, to work with nature, and to feel like you're actually moving the earth. This is a really beautiful material to work with. You're touching and shaping literal earth. And then my other paintings before ceramics, more in high school and early college, I was really into painting. And not many people know that about me because I don't really enjoy painting so much anymore. I'll be honest, I've been really heavy into sculpture. But these are actually pieces that I created, two of which I created in college, one of which sold during my senior show. But that middle is actually one of the murals I've done. So I've actually done 5 murals in San Diego, California when I was in high school and early college. And I've done 2 murals here in St. Petersburg, actually. One of them is on a little jewelry store in Ocean Drive. Thank you guys for coming. And then the other one is there's an ecology center right outside of Eckerd where they do like marine life studies and things. And I did a group mural there as well. But this one I felt was worth showing today because I made this when I was 18 years old. I did not use a single measuring stick for this. I just used my brain, which I don't even know how I did that. And it's actually a private commission for someone who owns a vineyard in the mountains of California. So the inspiration for the piece is they had this beautiful fountain in their entryway. And so I actually had to sand down the concrete. I had to actually make the concrete flat and then hand paint the ombre and then hand paint the grape leaves. So this picture is actually, you can just kind of see the grapes kind of barely floating in there, but they are grape vines and they are meant to be in kind of a pattern that when you look above. But the other beautiful part of it is if you were standing here looking at the fountain, the colors would go from orange to blue. And when you looked at that with the sunset, the sun would go from orange to blue. So it would almost look like the sunset was reflecting in the pond. And then swarm installation. One of the last few things I want to tell you guys about, I'm actually wearing some of my jewelry tonight, but this is another installation initiative that I've taken on since 2020, actually. It's been with me for a while. So I basically was inspired during COVID to start collecting bees that I would see on the ground. They just made me very sad to see them, just kind of disparaged on the ground. I would see so many of them that I felt this urge to just start collecting them. And I didn't really know why or what I was going to do with them until I had a bunch of them in my house. And then I figured, well, I should do something with them or else they're going to go bad. And just morally, what's the point of collecting them if they're just going to rot in your house? So I started playing around with different resins when I was in college, I'd say maybe 2021. Originally, I did use a toxic resin that I was not a very big fan of, but since then, in the last 5 years, they've actually developed a non-toxic resin that is much better for not only the artist, but for the environment, which is very important for this type of work, right? It's about conservation, so it doesn't make much sense if you're using a toxic material to try to help the pollinators, right? So it did take a while for me to find a process and a product that I really liked. And you'll notice it's a mold making process. So a lot of them are the same shape. So I have little silicone molds. I place the bee inside, I place the resin, and then I'm using toothpicks in my hands to pick out all of the bubbles and place everything and cure it with UV lights. And I do this in the hundreds. So it started with just one bee, and now I have over 400 bees crystallized and ready to be hung. So this did a gallery tour in 2023 of about 6 different galleries in St. Petersburg. It made it on the news twice during that year. And actually people would approach me about the project. They were calling me the bee lady. I was selling earrings. I was even making mini chandeliers for beekeepers in town. And people really, the reactions, that was the most amazing part to me. So this is an image of it being hung in the factory. You guys might recognize the Florida-Rama gallery. This is back a few years ago when they had studio spaces just all in that area. So that is when I had a painting studio at the time, but I was really starting to do more installation, big picture. What can I do just besides painting? And so I actually talked with Raheem. If you guys know Raheem, he was the curator at Florida-Rama and the factory for quite a while. And there was an open call for submissions. I had never met him before. I was still fresh out of college. And I applied and he accepted it. And he let me hang it in the main gallery there. And the response. I mean, I had people walk up and just start crying because they felt so bad for the bees and they felt such a strong emotional connection to these creatures. I had people go, oh, I didn't even realize there was bees in there. I had to, they thought it was just crystals and they didn't think more of it. I had people who didn't like it. They're like, oh, it's disgusting. You're using animals in art. That's disgusting. I don't like that. Which, hey, I mean, that's your opinion. I respect it, and I do think that you have to be careful about how you use these creatures. For me, I'm using it directly to make money for them living, so for me, I feel pretty good about my ethical situation. But I actually I want people to talk about this. I want to open conversation. So, if you hate my work, let's talk about it. I'm really not shy about that. It's kind of a controversial piece, but it's really, I want people talking about the bees, right? Like, okay, I want people focusing on it. And so many people wouldn't have stopped to notice the bee on the ground. And I think that's the beauty of this, is it's really stopping to be intentional about the world around us and to kind of make people see it in a new way. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I did actually just apply for a large grant to bring this project back to life with assistance and funding instead of just me and a ladder, because they're actually quite lightweight, and that's what the beauty of them as jewelry is. You just don't even feel them when you wear them. And I'm pretty low in my inventory. The last pieces I have for sale are at Duncan McClellan Gallery, but on my website I can make them to order. So that's just kind of a beautiful installation. And it also, my love for pollinators, I do have another project planned focused on monarch butterflies, not using their physical bodies, because I really don't want to encourage people to start collecting butterflies, especially endangered ones. But I have this project that I've started in the last 2 years where kids help me make paper butterflies. And then I want to hang those in an installation, which would then, again, raise money for the Nature Conservancy. So stay tuned. That project is still a few years out. I really want to focus on swarm right now. I'm also working on a children's book. I mean, I do so many things. It's hard to focus on just the one. But sculpture this year has really, and this show has really allowed me to focus and hone in on one particular thing. And then my other medium, illustration. So I mentioned that it kind of started with drawing for me. So I wanted to show you guys some of my earlier drawings. And actually during COVID, I mean, we all probably had a rough time during COVID. I also had a rough time during COVID. I had a little bit of an identity crisis because I was in school. It's really easy to be a student. I mean, not easy in all regards, but people tell you what to do. You know where you're supposed to be. There's a structure to it that I found very comforting. And so, unfortunately, with COVID, they did kind of shuffle us off campus a bit abruptly. And I don't have any family here. All my family is in San Diego, California. So I had an option, either move back in with them in quarantine, because I do have some medical concerns with my family. If I was going to stay with them, I did want to quarantine, or move in with my, at the time, partner and see how that goes with him and his roommates. So we tried that, and it didn't go so well, as you can probably imagine. So I did end up going home. I did end up flying home, but I had lost my job. I had quit school for a semester. I had broken up with my partner who I was living with at the time. I'm going back home and I'm like, who am I? What am I doing? And so I just started drawing a lot. I mean, I didn't even want to get a job because I was worried about the exposure for my parents. So I really didn't have a way of making money, a way of building forward. And I don't know about y'all, but I had never lived through a pandemic before. So I was scared. I mean, there's a lot of emotions going on, and I had never worked through something like that before. I also had my 21st birthday during all of that. So I was, just a full identity crisis. And so I really just dove into my artwork. It was kind of my savior. With everything going around me, I actually found an online community that really appreciated my work. I actually built an account that got up to 7,000 followers within a year. It was unfortunately hacked and stolen from me a year later, so I had to build back up, and I'm still building back up. But I really got so many nice comments, and people were buying prints, and I got a printer, and I was selling prints online and stickers. And I don't know, I just was really drawing and really thinking about animals kind of from their perspective, but also thinking about human emotions and how can we display that through animals. I find that when I go to paint, the problem that I personally have with just painting like a person is, as the viewer, when you look at that person, you're going to have assumptions. How wealthy are they? How old are they? What race are they? Where do they come from? When we look at a person, even an image or depiction of a person, we can't help but have all of these assumptions because that's how our brain works. And so I feel that when I'm trying to communicate an emotion, I don't find it very appealing to use people. I feel like there's so much you have to navigate with that. But using animals, we still make those assumptions, but it's, I don't know, you can cut through a lot and really dig deep to what you're trying to communicate. So for my early illustrations, I really tried to do that, using the wolf to explain that, yes, there's different phases of the moon, but there's different phases of ourself as well. The cat who has the third eye open, but is thinking about what do cats like? So the feathers and those flowers are actually catnip, the depiction of catnip when they bloom. And then that paw print or the bee, I did a bejeweled bug series. So this one was like the amethyst and the bug, and how can we look at those patterns in nature and how they repeat themselves and how one ties into another. And you'll find with my ceramic work, I do that as well. So I want to go back to the ceramics. And I want to talk a little bit about, in that centerpiece there, I have the start is usually the butterfly. And then from there, I'm choosing the stone and I'm choosing the glazing to match that nature. And you'll even notice in this show, animal mimicry, right? Those tigers and the tiger butterflies, those are real animals. Tiger butterflies mimic the stripe of tigers. They want to be dangerous. They want to be feared, but they're not really that scary, so they have to kind of mimic other animals who are scary. Or might be venomous or, might have those features that they want. So even in my ceramic work, I'm looking at the animal mimicry from how does nature mimic itself? How does one aspect of nature tie into the other? And I think art is just the perfect medium to tie all that together in. So going back to the very end of my presentation, I'm getting pretty close to the end of my time. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was just kind of giving you guys ways to stay connected. If you want to see more of my work, if you want to stay connected, shows that you can, and I forgot about the henna tattoos as well. Another medium that I used to do. I actually forgot that I put this in the presentation because it was so early days. I wasn't sure whether to mention it or not. But when I was 15 years old, my very first job was being a professional henna artist. I actually had to get a worker's permit from my high school because at 15, you're not actually allowed to just get hired by someone. And so at the time, I was working at a really crowded amusement park in San Diego, California. We're talking about probably one of the bigger tourism spots in the US. I mean, if you think of San Diego as a city and you think of this being a busy attraction in San Diego, we had hundreds of people a day, and it was only me and one other artist who were working at the stand. And so I was, in training. I was 15. I didn't know that much, but I stuck with it, actually. I found that this was a really good way to make money while I was in school because I was a student, and in the summer times, I would like to make some money. I don't have as much to do, but this was a job that was seasonal. So when school started, I didn't have to carry this job into the school year, but I could really focus on just making money doing it. Plus, I'm learning skills, right? I'm practicing my drawing skills, and people would come to me with a photo on their phone, and I had to be able to give them whatever was on that photo. So I did get pretty good at not just copying images, but also developing my own. So you'll notice these are pretty complex for henna tattoos. They're a little bit more than just a mandala or a flower. I, at the time, thought I wanted to be a tattoo artist. So I was really asking all my friends, can I draw on you? And using as much material as I could to really push my own designs. And so I did start my own business in college. I was doing henna tattoos. I was getting hired to do places. It was, again, a nice little bit of money, practicing my hands and connecting with people. So this middle image is actually from Dolly's birthday party. The Dali Museum actually hired me to do henna tattoos and face painting for Dolly's birthday last year, which was really exciting. And I found actually a lot of the docents were lining up, and I volunteered there, so I knew a lot of the people. And they were just so excited of like, I want, Dolly's elephant painting. I want this woman. I want the clock melting. I want his face. And people were just so happy to see his imagery coming to life on the skin. So that's one of the things I do appreciate about henna is it's more than just kind of a trendy tool. And of course, it does have a whole cultural significance, which personally I'm not tied to, so I don't feel a need to speak to that. I don't do weddings. I use the medium kind of in my own way. But it was really interesting to see how it connects with people. When you draw on your skin, you're wearing that. So I'd say even in college, one of my little side gigs that I would do is I would sit down with other college students. I would sit down with anyone who felt like they needed a little bit of counseling, and we would sit down and say, what's either a goal that we're working towards or a fear or something that we're trying to get away from. And we would mark our skin with imagery, with flowers, with something that reminds us of that intention, and then watching it fade on your skin. you're either getting closer to your goals or you're getting further away from your problems. It's a physical sensation of time. It physically shows time on your body. In a way that isn't damaging, in a way that's very quick. So I'd say in that regard, it was actually quite healing for a lot of people as well. I mean, I had some crazy stories. Even I would go back in the summers and again work for that shop, and they actually moved locations. And I eventually became the only artist there. Out of the artists that were working there, I stuck with it so long that I was eventually just kind of running the whole place. And I would have people come up to me on the slow days, and this one woman, she had just had a double mastectomy, and she actually wanted me to do a giant chest piece for her. I had another woman whose husband just passed away, and they were always going to get these matching tattoos, but she couldn't stand to look at it every day. It just made her so sad. So getting it in the henna kind of helped her decide, what she wanted to do long term. So I'd say, that was kind of one of the mediums for me as well. It was kind of the henna and the drawing and all of that kind of coming together. So that is really all that I have planned for you guys today. Thank you again so much for listening. I do just want to put, if you guys want to stay connected, Instagram is where I'm most active, but you're also welcome to check out my Facebook. My website does have all the different mediums that I work with kind of shown in a more professional lighting. And then in my email, if you guys ever want to collaborate on something, if you want a commission for your home, whether it's ceramic or glass, I'm not currently taking painting commissions. But I'm very open to working with people, and I'm definitely living here in St. Petersburg. I'm very excited to see how different organizations and artists can work together to really, I mean, this town's already amazing, but how can we make it even better? If that's even possible. So I think that there's a lot to come, and this show is such a big moment for me to really show my glass to the community. And thank you guys all for, learning more than just about the glass that you see in front of you, for actually taking the time to learn more about me as an artist. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So I do believe we have about 5 minutes for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go through the slides.
Impressive multitude of media that you do.
Thank you.
However, I don't see printmaking, specifically block printmaking, which is what that is, basically, in the realm. So
Yeah.
what's up with that?
I have done some printmaking for like t-shirts and things. Yeah, I mean, I did the lino cuts. To be honest with you, I did it in high school. So I didn't feel a huge need to like dive into it in college. And I don't know why, it never really called out to me. There's so many steps to it. And if I'm going to carve something, I'm going to carve the glass, I've also cut myself with those lino cutters so many times, more times than I've burned myself in the hot shop. That's actually a very good question. There's a reason. So a Dremel tool actually does scratch the glass as you go. So even if you were making kind of clean carvings, you would still see all of the marks. Now, there are some artists who actually excel at that, surprisingly. Lisbeth Sterling is one that comes to mind. We represent her at the gallery, and she doesn't blow a thing herself. She just has artists that she'll request, okay, blow it in this size, in this shape, and with this color layers. Her work is very layered. It actually has like a dark green to a light green. And then she uses special diamond tools, and her stroking method is actually so soft and subtle that it doesn't scratch the glass the same way you would imagine. So there is ways to do it, but she, I mean, has studied that for a really long time.
You have someone blow it, so you're not into
well, actually, I should have included that in the presentation. So these vessels were kind of early days for me learning the carving process. So every vessel from this particular show was blown by Duncan McClellan and his team, which in a way actually increases the value of the artwork, because not only is it really high quality, it's really great size, but it does have his markmanship. As I do consider these collaborative works. That's a good question. This is actually the first time I've displayed them outside of his gallery. I guess I did do a small participation in Florida Craft Art, but those are all very close with Duncan, so everyone there knows Duncan. But I would say in the future, yeah, I would probably market collaborative work, because it's important to the pieces. But I will say this year, my goal, in addition to putting this show together, was I wanted by May. So in November, I set a goal for myself by May. I want to be able to have blown my own vessel. And I was actually successful in that. I do apologize, I don't have any photos in this particular presentation, but the piece that I made is about this big, and I actually revisited the very, very first tiger design that I ever did. It's different than the ones in this show. but it has a single butterfly hidden in the eye versus like the dual butterfly that you'll see over here. It just has the one. So I actually wanted to, with my own blown piece, revisit the very first design that I ever did. And that one I've applied for a show in it in another gallery, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, so I am at the point now where I do have probably about 7 to 10 vessels of my own that I'm waiting to carve that I blew this season. So that's kind of the next thing that you guys will see from me. You'll start to go into galleries and gift shops, maybe other gift shops, and I don't know, see smaller, more affordable pieces. Because another thing is, I don't want the pricing to be too prohibitive. Of course, glass is going to be more expensive than ceramics across the board. But if I can give you something that I've made that's part of my journey learning versus these pieces, which are already kind of perfect from like a glass standpoint, I do think it makes sense to have lower prices for those, and also smaller pieces. We do find, I work as a curator in a gallery, I work in sales, so we do find a trend. People are buying smaller and smaller. They're living in smaller and smaller spaces, unfortunately. And so they're wanting more of the little piece that can fit into their cabinet or their niche. So I am hoping to make more ceramic pieces and glass pieces that are fitting more of that, just more accessible to people, so you could still own my artwork even if you don't have the budget for something in this room.
How thick are the walls of those vessels?
That is a great question. Yes, and the pieces do actually get noticeably lighter by the time you finish carving them because you are removing, I don't want to say a significant amount of material, maybe probably only about 5 to 7% of the material. It's not actually that much, but you can feel a little bit of the weight give. I would say each of these pieces are different. They vary from probably about a ½ inch to a full inch in thickness after being carved. So some of the pieces are quite thick, like that piece behind you with the butterfly and the tiger. That I believe is the thickest piece out of this entire show, versus some of the ones that have more of the opening where you can really see inside. They tend to be a little bit thinner. But you have to think about that when you're carving through it, because also the depth of that black varies. So sometimes I will just be like carving and carving and the black is just not disappearing. And that's how I know it's a really thick layer of black. I should also mention when we're blowing these vessels, the way that we get the black on there is actually by rolling the entire vessel in a powder of black glass. So that's actually how it's the whole piece. The color is what you start with. That background color is that main color that you're using to blow the vessel. And then once you have the shape that you like, you're actually rolling the entire piece in a black powder. You have to do it at least 3 to 4 times to get an even coating, but that's what creates the black that once it cools down, we can carve into. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
When did you first realize you wanted to do this?
Oh gosh, I'm not even sure I've decided that. If you're talking about being an artist, I was actually kind of against being an artist as a kid. I used to think I wanted to be a lawyer. Because I've always been good at talking, I've always been good at kind of like arguing a little bit, which works well for sales. And I also just, so many people told me like, oh, being an artist is a hard life. And I didn't want a hard life. So I kind of thought, oh, I'll do something that makes a lot of money. That's very easy. And funny enough, both of my parents are accountants, but they were incredibly supportive of me being an artist. They bought me my first easel when I was like 11, like a nice easel, and we just kept it in my courtyard. And I would just paint there all the time. In San Diego, you can leave things outside and they don't get moldy. I've tried painting outside in Florida. It's not as much fun. I've had to like pick bugs out of my oil paintings and been like just screaming about it. But yeah, so I would say as a career, when I first went to college, I actually went just for visual arts. And then I had a mentor who was like, you're pretty good at business. You could try business too. And she was my mentor at the time, my assigned mentor, and she kind of lied to me a little bit. She said, it'll be super easy. Just do a double major. Like it'll fly by. It was not easy. I had to take the maximum number of classes that you can take. I couldn't have failed a single class, or I would have had to take another year out of pocket. I also was very fortunate to receive the highest scholarship that Eckerd actually gives out. So I graduated debt-free from Eckerd. I was also doing paid research studies. I worked in the library. I was a note taker. So I was really active on campus. I also helped fund Artists for Impact, which is actually still going strong today, I hear, which basically was teaching artists how to monetize their work. We would put together markets. We would charge ticket sales. We would not take a penny from the artist. They would get to keep everything they would make. We even taught them how to use the library printer to make prints with nice paper, which I don't think the library liked. But hey, it's our printing credit. We can use it for what we want, and then we would use the ticket sales to raise money for different local nonprofits. So yeah, I mean, it's been a journey, and one thing really feeds into the other. I would say after school, after I graduated college, I was I was trying to live as a full-time artist. I had my painting studio and that was my full-time gig. I was doing markets and commissions. And then they hired me at Duncan McClellan Gallery as a sales associate. Well, within a year that changed. I was the curator and working full-time, and it was just a whirlwind from there. So I would say I've had a connection to the arts since I was really young. It wasn't until I went into college that I said, okay, I'm going to give this a try as a career and like study it. And then I picked up the business, and I feel like really combining the two, mentoring other artists, has really been kind of my foundation as an artist today. Yeah. I think we have time for one last question, one last question. Or maybe that's just it. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gillian. That was amazing. Next, we're going to have Gwen come on up, because you have to switch your computer out, right? So you can come on up and do that. Chris, if you want to help her. In the meantime, let me turn my thing on. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Just, can you get rid of that? So I will give my little chat while this is happening. My name is Amanda Cooper. I'm the chief curator for the Morian Art Center and the Chihuly Collection. And this is my coworker, Chris, who has set everything up tonight. And how many of you, this is your first time at the Chihuly Collection? Okay. How many of you have been to the Morian across the street? Okay, so almost everyone. How many of you have seen the Fresh Squeezed show at the Morian across the street? Okay, all right. So just to piggyback on what Gillian said, this is our Fresh Squeezed Emerging Artist Program. And this, as the vinyl signage says over there, this is the 10th year we've been doing this. And so we first started in 2017 and doing this program, and it came about because in the year 2017, the Morian Art Center turned 100 years old, which was a big deal, of course. And we wanted to do something that intentionally that we've been doing organically for the last 100 years, and that's supporting and nurturing the careers of emerging artists. That's what we do. We're a community art center. We're not a museum. We're usually the stepping stone, I guess I want to say, before an artist has a show at a museum. So so we started Fresh Squeezed, and being a community art center, we wanted to keep it kind of local, so we made Fresh Squeezed a statewide show. So every year, and it's a juried show, every year we send out a call for entries, and it's across the state, and we get about 120 to 150 applicants. And out of those, we only select 6 to 8 artists for the exhibition. So it's a big jurying process that is very fun at times, but very difficult, because there's a lot of amazing work being done in this state, and then we have to say no to a lot of good work. So over the last 10 years, including this one, we have shown the artwork of, I think it's 64 artists in Fresh Squeezed from 26 different Florida states, from Pensacola to Miami and everywhere in between. So it really is truly a statewide exhibition. And just a plug for next year, instead of doing Fresh Squeezed 11 right away, we are going to do a retrospective of all the artists from the past 10 years. So if you come back to the Morian in the spring of next year, you'll be able to, kind of a where are they now type thing, where you'll be able to see what they're doing. So Gillian and Gwen, we will see you again. You don't get away from us that easily. So for those of you who have not been across the street at the Morian, we have 6 other artists in this show, and I see Clancy is one of them. She's one of our Fresh Squeezed artists too. So if you haven't been over there, please do go see it. The show over there is up through June 25th, and here it's up through July 19th. I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. The Go Be Off Foundation is an amazing Tampa-based foundation that funds a lot of our local art projects. They are an amazing resource, and we're so grateful to them. Also, our wonderful community partners, Lisa and Carrie Everett, are sponsors of this exhibition. And let's see, what else? For these 2 artists, they really stood out from the 130 applicants I think we had this year. Gillian, first of all, I'd known her work for a while, her being a local artist, and I knew her through Duncan McClellan's gallery. But she is the first artist out of all the 60 some odd artists in Fresh Squeeze that worked in glass. So that was really exciting. So it was a no-brainer that we would put her work over here next to the, Chihuahua, that guy. And Gwen's work just blew me away. I had not heard of her. She lives in, I don't want to take away your thunder, but she lives in Fleming Island, which I had never heard of. I'm a Florida native. There are apparently cities I'd never heard of. So, but I've been there. It's cool. And we also had just had a big bird show in the fall of last year. So I think I had birds on the brain. But one thing about these two artists, even though their work is very different in some ways, both of them are very process driven, and their processes are just fascinating to me, which I know Gwen will talk about. So so excited to have you tonight, Gwen. So she's going to talk, and then we'll do a little Q&A at the end. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I'll remember it. Anyway, Gwen.
Thank you. Do I need this? Yeah. Okay. Thank you to everyone here. It's hard to follow Gillian. She's such an excellent speaker. But a special thanks to Amanda. She's done such a great job guiding me in this process. It's been such an honor. And I'm so happy to be one of the 8 artists that was chosen to be part of Fresh Squeeze 10. A little background about me. I was born in New Jersey. My family here. I was always told that I was born with a natural artistic ability, and I can remember painting and drawing as far back as my memory goes. I was named after the artist Gwen Frostic. She's an artist in northern Michigan, and she's a nature printmaker. And when I was younger, she took me to her studio and taught me how to make the lino cut prints. And she was a big part of my love of nature. She was really inspired by the wildlife that was around her studio in northern Michigan. And a quote from her said that man must live with the nature around them and cannot separate himself from it. He's an integral part of the whole. And I feel like that is how I feel. Also in New Jersey, I luckily had a neighbor who was an artist, Narcissa Weatherby, and she let me have free reign of her gallery. She let me explore pottery and pastels and pencil and painting, which became my love. And she also let me join in her adult classes. I was the only child, and for when there were models, I had to have an adult supervisor naturally, because I was so young. Looking back, I'm so grateful to have had both those women inspire me with their love of nature. They look at it with such reverence and respect, and that's how I feel like we should also. A few of the birds in this exhibit visit the ponds in my backyard, like the wood storks and the little blue heron, which is over on the yellow painting. And I love seeing them in my yard. And this exhibit is all of the endangered and threatened birds of Florida. I think that I included every single one on the list with the exception of 2. And I hope that in the future that this doesn't serve as like a memorial to them, and hopefully that their numbers will improve. So in 2001, my now husband and I moved to Florida. So we've now lived here longer than we've lived in New Jersey. So I think we're officially part of the state. And we live in Fleming Island, which is halfway between Jacksonville and St. Augustine, Northeast Florida. When we moved here, we started a family, And having 3 children close together was a lot. And I felt the struggle between being a mom and dedicating time to pursuing art as a career, which was what I always wanted to do. So I leaned into more traditional arts like knitting and quilting. And I found that I really loved the patterns, and they calmed my mind, and living with 3 young children was a crazy time of life. So that's where my love of patterns evolved from there. We spent a lot of time in Key West since moving here, multiple weeks a year. It's become like our second home. And I've always been really influenced by the wildlife there, particularly the chickens. We like to joke that they speak to my soul. I feel them. They're so unique and colorful and beautiful and strong, and they don't say no. Carry on. So as my children got older, I was able to return to art. And I started with my first painting back, was the first one. And it was for a show called Fallen Furniture Love. And I knew I wanted to feature the chickens that were my love, sitting like a portrait, as if they were sitting to have their portrait done. And I ended up winning that show. And that really validated and encouraged me as a non-traditional educated artist. I didn't go to college for the arts. I struggled a lot with self-confidence and feeling like I belonged with other artists with their MFAs. And so it was really validating when I entered these shows. The second painting I did was called Family Tree. I made the chickens imitate the personalities of every one of my family. My husband's at the top. And yes, I love that painting. Unfortunately, it's living in Virginia. And then I started a series called Chickens and Chairs. I do think they're funny, the chickens. So it's okay to laugh. And I loved it. This was the Chickens and Chairs and the first painting. That was my first introduction into the patterns and the backgrounds. And the first one I freehanded, and I was trying to work out a system of how I wanted to do it. The second one I used bought stencils, but it wasn't, you could never buy what you wanted it to be. So I had to develop a process to make my own. So down the line, I did do that. The top painting is called Packed and Ready to Fly. I did that for a show. I had joined the local art guild in my town, and a few of the women in the guild really encouraged and mentored me in my pursuing being an artist full time. And these were shows that I did through them. And then in 2004, at the end of 2004, the Jacksonville Jaguars hired me to paint a poster for them. And that was this poster right here. And it was for their fan appreciation game. So I had painted the fans as the spots. And that was the first time I think my kids thought I was super cool. So we got to go to the game and they just thought, Mom has made it, I think. And so that was a good time. I always get tons of questions about the process. So this is the process I developed to make the background stencils. First, I we'll sketch on graph paper. I start with an idea in mind. If I want to express something specific or highlight a pattern of a bird, then I'll include it in the sketch. I then layer a piece of vinyl with the graph paper and cut it out with an X-Acto knife. And these are the stencil and the paper separated. I actually, this is this stencil, brought the stencils for you. And then I will stencil it in one solid color on the background of the painting. And then go back and retouch with accent colors. A lot of the stencils have multiple colors and shades of the same color. And then I will follow it up with an outline and touch up, because generally when you do the stencils, there's a lot of bleeding the sides. It's just inevitable. It's unavoidable for that. So these are 3 stencils I had made that I wanted to bring as examples. The first one is one I'm working on, and that is for a sea life painting I'm going to start. And so I knew I wanted the stencil to mimic the waves and the bubbles like fish. So that was the first one. The second one is the stencil from a painting in this collection that I think is a next door. It was the first painting. It's the shorebirds. Let's go. It's this painting. And I wanted to, because they were all beach birds, I knew I wanted to include vaguely sunshine and the sun. And so that is the stencil that I cut for that one. You see the sun's mixed in. And then the last one is the stencil I used for the Jaguars poster. And if you don't know the Jaguars, their fan motto is Duval. I'm not going to say it the way they say it. I know it's Tampa Bay here, but so I spelled out Duval in the stencil, and you see a little football. So this does spell out Duval if you look at it. The D, and then a lot of U's for the U-ball. So that was that. And this is a collection I have done before this one. This was called A Day at the Beach. And I thought it would be humorous to imagine that the animals I have seen heading to the Keys, if they had invaded the beach and taken over, how would it be? And so you see the the chickens with the surfboard and the beach chair. And yeah, well, chickens in the pool float. So that was a funny collection that I did for this one. I wanted to talk about a couple of the paintings in here. And these are all the threatened and endangered birds. And when I applied to Fresh Squeeze, I had the idea floating around for quite some time that I wanted to do a collection about these birds. And so I thought now would be the perfect time, and I started with the spoonbills. They were the first. They were what I submitted as an example of what the collection would be, along with other work. And I was so lucky enough to be chosen with Gillian. But the burrowing owls, I wanted to make sure I included because they're so cute and funny. And if you watch videos about them, which I watch videos about all the birds, the fledglings, the younger owls, they do tilt their head like that. They look like they're wondering what you're doing. And they're so cute. I love their colors and the patterns of the feathers, and they're just so great. But you can see the burrowing owls, and they are in, let me find what, they are in Cape Coral, Florida. So people have them in their front yards, and they have sticks and their flags tied to them. So if you ever want to go, I'm going to go one day and see them because they live underground and they're super cool. The second painting I wanted to talk about was the little blue heron. And that is because I have them in my backyard and I love their purple and blue plumage. But the Florida scrub jay, which is the other bird with them, is the only endemic bird of Florida ever. So, well, probably not long ago, but it's the only bird you can only find here. It's in Central Florida if you want to plan a trip to go see it. And it does not have a crest like a traditional blue jay, but it's not as mean as blue jays can be. I hear that people hand feed them, but I cannot say that for myself. So, and then the sandhill crane is behind you. And I just want to say we saw some off 75 when we were driving here today. So I usually see them in the Ocala National Forest, but we weren't there today. But they have the cutest babies. They are so small and have the biggest legs and feet. They're cute little babies. But they have a unique mating ritual that's dancing and leaping. And so I knew I wanted to highlight that special feature about them. Since finishing, I haven't decided what I thought my next project would be. I am toying with a few ideas of collections, but I am currently painting flamingos. They are not on the threatened and endangered list, but there hadn't been any in Florida in over 100 years. And thanks to Idalia, they are back. So they can be found in Florida Bay and in the South Everglades. So although they're such a symbol of Florida, they haven't been here, and it's nice that they're coming back. And let's see. And again, I just wanted to say thank you to Amanda and her team. They've been so great. And the sponsors of Fresh Squeeze. And it's been a significant milestone for me. I'm so just grateful to have been chosen. So, thank you. Yes. Questions?
One thing before we go to questions, one of my favorite parts of the Fresh Squeeze project is being able to visit each of these artists in their studios. And so myself and a couple of my coworkers, we drive all the way across the state. We're sometimes just 5 minutes away to see these artists, and which we love. It's a good road trip. And when we visited Gwen, we were at her home and got to see her cats, which was fantastic. And I think it was this painting that you were working on, and when we saw it, we thought it was finished, but you said it wasn't because you hadn't done the.
I hadn't done the touch up around the.
Yeah, so if you can't really see it from where you're sitting, but what do you use to the black outline?
Oh, it's the teeniest little paintbrush ever.
Okay. Okay. So each of these, shapes that you see, she outlines them in black with a teeny paintbrush. Teeny. She says, no, the painting's not finished because she hadn't done that. And that just blew my mind. And she said that you enjoyed it. Correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm misremembering, but you said you enjoyed doing it because it was meditative for
It
you.
does. I lose hours.
Yeah, so
Hours.
at the opening reception, Gwen wasn't able to be here, but her sisters were here, and
They
we were
were.
talking about it, and your sister and I both agreed that that would make us super angry, but you found it, and I just thought it was
It's
funny that your
super
sister was
relaxing.
just like, we are not the same there.
They
So
won't paint with me.
I just loved that. So much like when we visited you at your studio and you were showing us the I mean,
Oh
the
my
fact that you're
gosh.
doing that, not, looking through that little cloudy window and just
Yeah.
you guys, I'm in awe of you both. So you guys are amazing. Does anyone have any
Thank you.
questions for Gwen?
Oh.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit? I can't imagine how difficult it is to have the time to make these works while also having kids. I mean, I don't think I would have been able to make this work at this time if I had somebody.
So my kids are older now. I have one in college and two in high school, almost a third in high school. And when they were really little, I was so pulled both ways that I was struggling. I felt guilty when I was painting that mom. And so I really took a step back from trying to actively pursue a career in art. But now that they're older, if you choose to have kids, it's my time for me now. So thank you. Yes.
With your patterns, you're obviously on this one, when did they appear in your art series?
Um,
That pattern always.
I started, the first pattern was that one in 2011. So that was when it wasn't like meticulously measured like I measure these. And it was just hand drawn, there was no stencil. But that was the first one, and I liked how the complexity of the background, you would think it would take away from the subject, but I felt like it made them stand out more. And so then I continued exploring how to do it, and then developed my process maybe about 2017, I guess. I
Actually do what you want, finding the right stencil.
Yes, and I was trying to think of different ways to do it, and I generally don't reuse them, but sometimes I will alter them, like this painting, for example. After I did this, I might take this part of the stencil, the cross part, and cut that out, and then stencil that and add something else to it and make something different and new. I haven't done that, but it's possible, I guess, down the line. Yes.
Gillian talked about the animal almost as if it were an archetype or a stand-in for us.
Yes.
As you paint birds, are they anamorphic? Is that the word? Are they stand-ins for you? Or archetypal sort of models of our behavior?
I like to, when I paint them, I have specific attitudes and demeanor in mind. For like this painting, for example, these were my boys. They were always fighting, like as wrestling. And I wanted my husband and my daughter. So I do want them to have personalities and more human. Yes.
Also, I didn't hear, did you paint the pattern first and the bird over the pattern?
Usually I didn't in the pictures of the stencil because I just did that to take pictures and that for me to show you. So this one I just did that for the presentation.
Do the background first.
Generally, I'll paint the solid background and I'll do a rough sketch of what I want to paint. and then I'll do the stencil and then finish painting.
And also the fact that you're not painting looking at a photograph necessarily.
I'm not.
That's crazy.
I'm not. I should have spoken about that. I do a lot of research. I have books of research from this collection, and I'll have pictures of all the birds so I can tell, oh, do they have 3 toes sticking, what type of feet they have, if they have webbed feet. And then I just draw it from memory. But I do extensive research about them beforehand. But the chickens, no research necessary. I can draw them forever and ever. Yes. Oh, the chairs, yes. I knew for this collection I wanted to do a portrait style chair, but I wanted it to morph into more of a natural, what their natural environment would be like. And so for the owls, because they live underground, which is crazy for a bird, I knew I wanted to do a stool and show the root system.
I think the chair is almost a connection to the human.
Yes.
So it's a stand in again for a human presence. And I also love the order and disorder of the painting. The pattern is the order, and then the disorderliness of nature. That sort of counterpoint.
Tension.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Have you ever worked with any other mediums?
I worked a lot with pencils, but I was more encouraged to do it. It wasn't what called to me. And I really always wanted to paint. Even when I wasn't able to paint, I always wanted to paint. So I have explored other mediums, but I'm really solidly landed here.
Why acrylic and not oil?
I don't think I could manage the pattern work with oils. So.
Question out there?
Would you ever try underwater, kind of like these?
Yes, I've done several in a collab I did with a jewelry artist. I don't have any pictures of them. And the one stencil I showed there is for an underwater. I haven't decided what it's going to be. Well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you all so much for being here.